Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to have today Dr. Christos Hadjioannou. He's a postdoc researcher at the philosophy department, in philosophy at the Department of Classics and Philosophy. He works at the University of Cyprus, which is a wonderful island in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it's a member state of the EU. For his philosophical career, he visited plenty of places in Europe, I'd say. He got his PhD in Sussex. He worked on Heidegger and emergence of mood in Heidegger's phenomenology. He was a postdoc at Sofia University. He kept working on the 20th century philosophy, specifically on Martin Heidegger, and the affective aspects of his work, which is certainly an interesting angle to treat philosophy, and especially Heidegger's philosophy. Now he's currently working on Heidegger and the Stoics, also on a book on book and conference on phenomenology and mindfulness. And besides his philosophical career, there's also a strong political activity. I mean, he's active with refugee and migrants. He's the member of a migrant and refugee solidarity network, which supports African, Middle Eastern refugees and migrants in general from Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iraqi, and unfortunately today also Ukraine. Is a trade unionist, and thank you for that. He's defending also the Union of Doctoral Scientists in Teaching and Research, DED. And is also a co-host for a weekly radio show on political and social issues. But the place where I would like to start, since we are making philosophy personal, is your life. I mean, in your bio, what I particularly like is that you mentioned that you are married to an intensivist and you are the father of two children. How does that affect your work? Because you said that, this specific aspect of your life strongly impact your work. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Well, thank you very much, Susie, for the invitation and for the question. I come prepared to be a bit more personal. How I manage to how personal circumstances or extra philosophical circumstances affect my philosophy. So. After I got married, I mean, I had to. I got married to an intensivist, and an intensivist is a medical doctor who works in the ICU, so in the intensive care unit. And slowly but surely, I came to understand that the whole household, including my own lifestyle, has to conform to this, because there are specific needs and demands that come with that job description, and one has to conform to it, and it absorbs you, and in a way that you have to accommodate everything to those needs, because it's always about life and death. And that wins every other need, every other practice. And therefore, I'll give you something very, very specific. For example, if I have a deadline to meet and I have to submit an article or whatever, but in the same evening, or my wife is working on a shift, a night shift, and she receives a phone call, and she has to go in to the hospital within minutes. then everything is up in the air. So obviously I can't insist and say, oh, look, but I have to submit my philosophical article. So you have to, so slowly you have to organize life around that. So that's the practical aspect, how slowly everything becomes oriented in that it becomes a battlefield.
Yeah.
And you have to create a space for that. But it's not only practically demanding, you also have to, I also have to support my wife also psychologically and mentally, because it's very demanding. It's always there's always an ugly story happening, because not everyone who dies dies timely. There are many premature deaths. There are mistakes. There are accidents, and it does take a toll. And so, whereas in the past, I have become interested in Heidegger. I had become interested in Heidegger's philosophy, partly because the phenomenon of death was something I was really interested in, and I was intrigued by it, and I did suffer from existential anxiety. So Heidegger's philosophy made sense to me, but I never thought that I would end up organizing my entire life around death by getting married, or life and death, or the limit by getting married to my wife.
Do you see similarities between what you learned in Heidegger and what you are living through the stories of your wife? Or do you think, okay, that was just theory, now life is really something else?
Well, okay, there is a massive difference between theory and practice. For example, time pressure. You have limited time to react and you have to practically intervene. Another thing is when you mourn a death, again you have a limited, finite time, and everything happens very quickly. What we would describe as urgent in philosophy has a completely different meaning to what they describe as urgent. So the sense of urgency is something completely different. But also, yes, I have come to verify that many Heideggerian insights were correct. For example, the fact that we are constantly running away from death. We don't deal with it. And our societies, some cultures more than others, we have created all these elaborate things that basically are there to just hide or conceal the fact that we are finite creatures. But this becomes manifested in a different way in the ICU than in philosophy or in the philosophical classroom, in the lecture hall. For example, very often what happens is the patients or their families specifically, they are not ready. They have they have not worked with their feelings. They don't know how to react and how to deal with the death of a loved one, and that sometimes becomes violent. Like they have violent reactions. Of course, that is also cultural, I think, in a sense. So possibly like Southern Europeans are more explosive, let's say, in their reactions than say Northern Europeans, who are a bit more I don't know, cool in the way they react. Now, and I'm sure sociologists and psychologists would have more to say on that. Maybe it's not true. I don't know, but that's my impression anyway. So you have to, so there are, what's missing, I've realized through talking to my wife and what's going on in the ICU every day, that people don't know how to react to death. And I'm not talking about premature deaths or deaths of, people who were fine and just had an accident and tragically died. I'm talking about people who can't go on anymore because of health deterioration. And not only that, they have there are no answers. They have never faced, or we have never faced up to bioethical dilemmas that inevitably come up or will come up with a relative, and we get to decide if we are, the relative who is in a position to decide. Because in the ICU, most people are unconscious, so they can't decide for themselves. And then you get an informed opinion, from the you get informed, sorry, by the doctor, but they have no tools to decide about what's right and what's wrong. They have never thought about these issues, and yet, here we are all going to die, and we maybe we should be discussing about these things more openly. For many reasons, not just for psychological reasons, but also for philosophical reasons.
How do you do with your children?
So
your wife comes back home, I think, heavy with this, with her job every night. You support her. How do you introduce the theme to your children?
The theme of death.
Right. Is there? Is
well,
it?
Oh God! See, so for example, this is something that we are only now. I admit I am at a loss. I don't know how to introduce it to my children. Just to say the ages, my daughter is 4 years old, so and my son is 2 years old. My daughter started using the word death. But I think I'm not sure she understands what it means exactly. I mean, she knows that she can understand that it's a state, some sort of state, which is different to other states of being, or a modality, but she doesn't quite know, of course, what it is. And we are in a conversation with my wife to decide what should we tell her? Because if you do we use this well-known paradigm that it's like sleep, that someone is like sleeping, but then you might create other issues. And we had this conversation with my wife, and she was telling me, well, maybe we should consult a professional psychologist. And I don't know to what extent psychologists have actually come up with what sort of advice they would have to give us. But the problem is, I think it's deeper, because it also depends on what is the ontology behind the psychologist. What I mean is that it depends also on what the psychologist believes about this world. So it's not that simple. It's not just about becoming more calm about death. It's also that I wouldn't want to say something that is entirely untrue, only to have someone who has been told an untrue story realize later, at a later stage, that it's all wrong, and fall have a massive breakdown. So maybe the reason we have breakdowns when it comes to realizing that the death and finitude has to do with the way we set it up in the beginning, to begin with. Maybe the stories we tell are, when they get toppled, they create a massive crisis. Now, I'm not saying that we should tell kids, your children, that, you die, that's the end of it, and that's eternity. right? Or even outside of time. That's the end of time even. Yeah, but maybe we should find maybe some mythologies are better than others, or some stories are better than others. And I admit I don't have a solution to that. This is completely fresh to me. And despite the fact that I have been a professional philosopher for all these, well, not many years. I mean, I'm young, but say 10 years. I've been thinking about these things. I have no solution whatsoever, because now it's not a theoretical exercise anymore. I have a real 4-year-old who, and I have to, it's more. I have to get it right, rather quickly. And I'm sure that something is wrong that needs to be fixed. In terms of the stories, or in terms of the way we do relate to death.
Yeah, I mean, because it's important to give them the sense of the preciousness of life, the uniqueness of life. When certain children tend to be a little mean with insects or animals, and you say, no, you shouldn't do this and that. And you give them the sense for for how fragile each body is.
Yeah.
But it's a metaphysical concept, because it literally goes beyond our physics. It goes beyond our body. Something is, and then it's not.
So the problem I have with is that I wish to, if I am to consult a psychologist, I would really like to know, have a chat with them before. Yeah, like what's your? I mean, if they believe in God, for example, that would mean something for me, because I don't believe in God, for example. Or if they believe in circular time, or if they are a Buddhist, I would want to know. I think because it will affect inevitably the advice or the approach.
Have you noticed through your life experience or your debates with her, if a religious worldview, a strong religious background helps in accepting death, or in the end we are all, fragile in front of it?
Well, so from what I gather, it's unpredictable. It doesn't really matter, because, and that's my own take. It's because many people they would say that they practice a religion, but somehow it hasn't matured in them, or they haven't really worked out what it means when it actually comes, the moment of death, when it's really there, how they would react, because they haven't really worked through it, I think. So, but I think it does help sometimes. If you really believe and do it properly. Of course, now I'm creating this dichotomy between authenticity and inauthenticity, which, it might help. But of course, you need to believe in it. You need to really believe in it.
Of course.
So I just wanted to say something in relation to the previous question, like how did my life change philosophically? So Heidegger, I think, which is the philosopher I'm studying mainly, yes, he did get many things right about death, but slowly I'm realizing that there are some things missing from his account, and I've figured it out empirically. I mean, from my own experiences, which is after getting married and having children, slowly but surely, the shift of my attention, my attention shifted, and it became other oriented. It became oriented towards my wife, and organized life around my wife's job, and then my children. So there's something new happening in me about death, And it's the fact that I'm not afraid of dying myself, because I had worked on that on my own. But now there is a new, I will call it, it's a full-fledged existential crisis, which I can't deal with it. I mean, I haven't found the way to not even analyze it properly, and it has to do with the prospect of me dying as a prematurely, which would mean that my children would be left without their father, and so completely exposed, and all the traumas that are created by the possibility of losing your father or your parent at this young age. So that's something different, because I think qualitatively it's a fear of death that is different, because it stems from another's life point of view, and then something which is even well, can't say worse. Yes, worse is my children's death, because you realize that I will die. That's fine. I mean, I have realized this early on in my life, but I had never thought the possibility that I will have children and they will die. So I have to somehow work out that it's not just me; it's my children who are the most precious thing I have and it's not about me anymore. So that's something I think is missing from Heidegger's account. But I have to admit, I haven't properly understood how it works and analyze it. And I wish to write on this in the near future to see how it complements or whether it modifies Heidegger's account of anxiety, existential anxiety.
Because as far as I understand, what we have in our control, what we have in our hands is acceptance. I mean, I don't know if there's something else you understood we can share to give courage to those parents who are going through something as hard as this in this moment.
I think, yeah, I really don't know. This is completely new to me, and I'm not sure there is any way of going through it unless you actually go through it. Well, as regards acceptance, because I got interested lately in mindfulness and acceptance-based theories of emotions, of behavior, of how to deal with of therapy. Sorry, like acceptance-based theory therapy, and I mean, it depends what we understand by acceptance and what it does. So if acceptance would mean that in some way anxiety or fear of death would resolve or somehow disappear, I would be against that.
Yes.
Because philosophically it would create a host of other problems. For example, because it's through anxiety that we get a sense of time, for example, and temporality. I would wish to keep that there, the consciousness of time, and that time is finite. I mean, because if it's not finite, I can't see how it makes sense. I have become interested in developing or considering how Heidegger could, through Heidegger's philosophy, could develop any form of mindfulness, like see if his model of authenticity, as he writes it as it's developed in Being and Time, his book that he wrote in 1927. If we can have any version of mindfulness that would keep all these notions that he would want to call authenticity there, Actually, that's my project now. Namely, I'm writing a monograph now on where I am trying to juxtapose Heidegger's theory of emotions,
Mm.
and a model of mindfulness, let's call it like that, and juxtapose it with Stoic theories of emotion and Stoic mindfulness, as opposed to Buddhist mindfulness or Buddhist derived mindfulness, and see where it gets me. If Heidegger has something new to offer, something different compared to the Stoics, and if acceptance or would mean something different for Heidegger than the Stoics.
Can you tell us a little bit of both? I mean, a short synthesis of Stoic theory of emotions, Heidegger's theory of emotions.
Okay, so I will terribly simplify.
Please, yeah. Yes.
The story is the real story is much more complicated.
Of course.
I'll be unfair to both here, just to set up the juxtaposition.
But take the responsibility. I asked you.
But my hypothesis is this: that to begin with, I focus on early Stoic philosophers, namely Zeno of Citium and Chrysippus, and they have a relatively simple theory of emotions, where emotions are considered to be products of judgment, so products of reasoning. So it's bad reasoning. So when your reasoning gets something wrong, you experience negative emotions. For example, you have fear arising because you haven't properly judged the state of affairs. And therefore, if these negative emotions are a product of judgment, it means that we can resolve them the same way that they have been created. So if we correct our judgment, if we revise our judgment, then those negative emotions will go away. And the aim of the Stoic philosopher or the Stoic person is to be as free from emotions as possible. And here I would want to see how fear of death plays out, and so on and so forth. Now, on the other hand, we have Heidegger, specifically in his early work that I mentioned in Being and Time, where emotions, and I'm simplifying, are not products of judgment. So they are, let's say, a different faculty, and they, of course, work both together and antagonistically to reason, to understanding, let's say, to be more precise. But emotions have something fundamental to offer, and they are actually, without them, you can't have judgment either. So they serve a fundamental purpose. And so when it comes to understanding the meaning of a life and the meaning of being, Heidegger focuses on anxiety, and it's through the experience of anxiety that we get to understand the meaning of being, which in that book he called is temporality, is time, it's finitude, that we have a beginning and an end as creatures. So that's the setup, more or less, and various other concepts around these two opposing poles.
What you just said about emotions, making judgments, and taking an ethical stance affects or is reflected in your work with refugees, with migrants. Do you see any connection with that area of your life?
I was outside of Cyprus for many, many years. I studied in the US, then in England, then I was in Germany, then in Ireland. So I came back, I left when I was 21, came back in my 30s, to a country that had changed in many respects. But for me, the most important change, or what I faced with, was the refugee crisis. So which was a very, it was a series of events. There were wars in our geopolitical neighborhood. We had Syria, we had also the Palestinians, we had Lebanon, but also many migrants from Africa. And suddenly Cyprus, of course, other Mediterranean countries too, like Italy and Greece, suddenly a lot of refugees and migrants started coming here. And it was so abrupt and massive that it created a lot of tensions, a lot of racism, but also a lot of urgency to step in and help out these people. So it was, in a way, it was like something that was solicited to respond to a need of the other, and it's an other whom I don't have many common things with, because look, I mean, so I'm neither religious. I am, I come from a privileged background compared to them, because I am an EU citizen. I live in Cyprus. I am white, and so on. I'm a man, and so on and so forth. So, and I do consider myself to be, let's say, a liberal, atheist, all these things. But then what happens is we have many people coming over from Africa. They are black, and of course they experience intense racism, not just at the level of social level, but also institutional racism. But also we have people coming from other countries in the Middle East, and I mean, there's no need for me to overanalyze. You know how it goes. There's a lot of racism, and suddenly I have to react to all these things. I feel that I need to respond and help out. The response, the ethical response, was based. Either one could argue could make a case based on reason, make rational arguments on why we have an obligation to respond to this and help out. And the other aspect was the emotional. I was trying to, and I came I found myself realizing that if we focus on the emotions that these people undergo, I think we open up more possibilities to do the right thing, to respond to the call. It's a particular obligation, and that you receive a call, and this pertains not only to my emotions or the emotions of the agent who is in this country, but also identifying our own emotions, but also identifying their emotions. So the story would be, a typical story would be that someone is hostile to the refugees because they feel threatened by them. They feel threatened by them. The way they rationalize it and they conceive it would be either they think that they will take their jobs. They think that they have a plan to Islamicize Cyprus, which is absurd. But of course, if they want to practice their religion, what's the problem? And so they base their reactions on anxiety, the hostility. But then you start analyzing and trying to make them see that the refugee also it's because of anxiety and fear and all these existential threats that he or she has made all these effort, this journey, risky journey to come to this country, or they were persecuted and so on and so forth. And so this creates a common ground upon which to acknowledge that, look, we are all precarious beings. We are all in the same boat, and based on that, we can, justify solidarity, the need for solidarity.
Thanks. Yeah, here we come back to what you were saying before about acceptance. Acceptance not as deleting the anxiety, those elements that are essential to being human, but as a way of recognizing that they are there. Because if we acknowledge our own anxiety, we are able to relate to other human beings who feel the same existential threat.
That's right. But also not only negative emotions, but also positive emotions like happiness or joy. There's this again this idea that it's not fine if you see a refugee who is smiling or has a moment of joy. It's as if it's prohibited. Like they have to pretend, or they have to get stuck and remain stuck in their anxiety or in fear. But you know what? Just like you have the need to be joyful at moments, it's the same thing,
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point about what we are experiencing also with Ukraine. They might be more in contact with the sense of happiness and joy for life than others, because they are at the core of life. I have a friend of a friend who just managed to escape from Ukraine, and she shared this story of feeling at some point a wave of happiness leaving her, and she just ran away from a war, left everything behind, and yet she felt, oh my God, life is wonderful and it's precious. Yeah, you are allowed to feel all the.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Our solidarity shouldn't stop when the other is suddenly happy.
No,
not a signal that you're no longer obliged to meet their needs.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, to move happiness on a personal level, how and when did you feel the happiest in your life? What is the peak of happiness for you?
Well, okay, so I inevitably I will say, so the normal cliches, but I think there is a reason why cliches are there. It's because they make sense for a lot of people and for a lot of time. So it has to do with my children, but specifically with a caveat. I think if to locate happiness more clearly in my life, it has been when my children are happy, and combined with a sense of security, job security in my own life. So specifically at the beginning of a contract, when I have, now I am in my third postdoc, and it's the usual thing where I have to apply for jobs, so this endless. So when my children are happy and I have a new job contract, and I don't have to worry too much about it, at least for some time. It's that.
Yeah, makes sense. That practical security to be able to enjoy life with the people you love, doing your part in the world, and being able to survive while doing that.
Yeah, and it also helps my own job. I mean, my philosophy. So because I can philosophize better, I think, because I have more time and more I'm able to concentrate for longer periods of time, when everything is in place, let's put it like that, at least temporarily.
And then what would you say is the main hindrance then of for your research? Is it still time related, funds related, or?
Well, so let me think. I think the main hindrance would be it has to do with what I've just mentioned. So when I'm towards the end of a contract, and I have to resume writing job applications and research proposals, and it's absurd, and it becomes unsustainable because you have have very little time to actually do what you're paid for, to philosophize and write articles and books and so on and so forth, because you have to write, because you're thinking about your next contract, your next project, and it's not a good situation. And I think it's because of politics. These are political decisions made by various bodies and universities that sustain this status quo, and I think it's unproductive too. So one of the main hindrances to my research is the fact that when my contract is close to end, each time I have to invest all this time to come up with new research proposals, and there's like a 5% chance of each proposal to be successful, and another hindrance would be indeed the child minding. So some days it's just impossible to work because having children, the demands are immense, and it's a bit unpredictable at times. And also you worry about this and that, and illnesses. Children in the first years of their lives, they're always sick, and they make you sick too. So that's something I hadn't realized how important it becomes. And then we had the pandemic too, which meant schools were closed, we were working from home, and so all of these things have been a hindrance to my research. Yeah.
Where did you find the energy, the moral and emotional energy to stand up against it? I mean, to stand up against rejections, against illnesses, against this Sisyphus feeling of having to start dragging the rock up the hill again.
Yeah. So look, so I think it's because you have a creature next to you who there's no option really.
Okay.
So if you're sick, you have no option. You have to keep doing it. With respect to rejection, I mean, job applications and so on and so forth. To be honest, I haven't found a way to deal with it or to protect myself. But on the other hand, I think if I protect myself in a way that I would become, less sensitive to rejection, it would mean that I have also lost my motivation. So my desire. So I really want to to apply for X grant or Y job, and I invest all this time to get it, and then I get really disappointed when I don't get it, despite the fact that I know what the chances are.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be otherwise in my personally, this is personal. So because then I'll try again, and I'll still have the desire to succeed, which is what will make me, try again. Whereas maybe in the past I had more time to work with my own disappointments. Now there is not much time.
You have to move on faster.
Yeah, that's right. Life goes on, and I think there's no better example of how life goes on when you have a small child that it's a combination of being both very cute and very annoying at the same time, or it's everything, So it really it drags you out from your.
Yeah, fortunately, it makes your ego necessarily smaller because you have to tend to so many things that, okay, the urgency is outside.
That's right, yeah.
Look, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation we had. We arrived already at the end of our talk, but as usual, I have the very last question, which gives the name to the podcast. So, what's the meaning of life for you?
Every year, maybe I have a different answer, but now at the stage I'm at, my answer is quite ugly. I think it's meaningless.
Oh, all right.
So I'm going through a more like a Schopenhauerian moment, which I suspect I'll get over it. But that's the thing. The thing is, where I stand now, I do think life is completely meaningless, and it has to do, and it's terrifying me. It's really terrifying me, and it's what I mentioned earlier, that it has to do with the fresh realization that my children are dying too, which I haven't found a way to deal with it. But the peculiar thing here is that life goes on, despite my realization now that life is completely meaningless. It goes on, and I'm functional. And I have to be, and it's what I said. It's because in a bit my wife will come home with the kids, and I'll forget about this.
Yeah. I mean, I can see your point of view. Life don't necessarily need to make sense. Life goes on by itself, and
maybe life doesn't need a big meaning to go on.
Does it have your meaning? Do you have your meaning for life, or not even that? You just function because you have to function.
No, I mean, yes, of course, it's meaningful. I don't know if there is a meaning. What is the meaning of life?
Meaning of life.
But it's meaningful. Tasks are meaningful. The way I respond to needs of other human beings. So there is meaning in. There is small meaningful moments, or there is local meaning, let's say.
Yes.
Despite the fact that the big picture is, there is no big picture.
I see your point. I mean, there's that too. Yeah. We have plenty of philosophy that will agree with you on Schopenhauer being one of them. Thank you so much, Christos, for this wonderful talk we had together.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I really enjoyed it.